This calm history documentary moves without urgency, and it does not ask for attention or effort. It follows daily life as it unfolded slowly along the Nile, shaped by repetition, routine, and shared expectation rather than dramatic events. There is no single moment to focus on, because life in ancient Egypt was defined by continuity rather than interruption. The narration remains steady so it can be listened to without watching, allowing time to pass naturally while the structure of everyday life becomes familiar. This is not a story that builds toward conflict or resolution, but a quiet observation of how ordinary days supported stability across generations. Listening closely is optional, as the rhythm is designed to remain even and predictable, making it suitable for rest, relaxation, and sleep. Life in ancient Egypt developed in continuous alignment with the Nile, not as a response to sudden events or unpredictable disruption, but as a steady adjustment to patterns that repeated with minimal variation across generations. The river was not experienced as a force that demanded urgency. Instead, it functioned as a reliable reference that shaped expectation, routine, and responsibility in quiet and consistent ways. Because the Nile followed a recognizable cycle, daily life was organized around anticipation rather than reaction, allowing individuals and households to move through ordinary tasks without pressure to accelerate or compete for time. Communities settled along the river with an understanding that proximity created stability, not opportunity for constant expansion or change. Homes, fields, storage areas, and pathways were positioned with familiarity rather than experimentation, reinforcing a sense of permanence that reduced uncertainty in everyday decision-making. Work was distributed according to seasonal rhythm and social role, yet effort was rarely rushed, because the environment itself encouraged patience, repetition, and continuity over speed or innovation. Through this structure, daily routine became predictable, and predictability reduced mental strain while supporting endurance over long periods of labor. Movement along the Nile reinforced this rhythm through slow, deliberate travel, where boats carried people, materials, and information at a pace that matched expectation rather than urgency. Travel did not interrupt daily life, it extended it, allowing exchange to occur without altering the underlying structure of routine. Because movement remained gradual, time itself was perceived as spacious rather than compressed, and daily experience unfolded with minimal sense of pressure or loss. The river connected settlements without forcing interaction, supporting coordination while preserving local autonomy and familiar order. This steady rhythm shaped rest as naturally as it shaped labor, because periods of activity were consistently followed by periods of stillness, without the need for strict measurement or enforcement. Pause was not treated as absence of productivity, but as a necessary phase that allowed routine to repeat without exhaustion. Individuals learned when to slow down through observation rather than instruction, and shared behavior created a collective understanding of balance that required no formal regulation. In this way, the Nile guided not only work but also recovery, ensuring that effort remained sustainable across the span of ordinary life. Through long exposure to this dependable structure, ancient Egyptian daily life remained coherent and stable even as generations passed and individual roles changed. The rhythm established by the river reduced the need for constant adjustment, allowing attention to remain focused on continuity rather than adaptation. Life proceeded without dramatic interruption, supported by repetition, familiarity, and shared expectation, forming a durable foundation that sustained society quietly and consistently over time. Time in ancient Egypt was not experienced as something that needed to be managed aggressively or divided into precise measurable units. Instead, it was understood through repetition, observation, and gradual change that unfolded without urgency. Daily life was shaped by familiarity rather than scheduling, and the passing of time was recognized through natural cues, seasonal shifts, and habitual routine, rather than clocks or enforced structure. This created an environment in which people rarely felt pressure to move faster than necessary, because time itself was perceived as something stable and dependable. Rather than viewing time as a limited resource, ancient Egyptians experienced it as a continuous flow that returned to the same points again and again. Tasks were not rushed toward completion, because completion itself was not the primary focus. Instead, participation in the process carried equal importance. Work, rest, preparation, and waiting were all considered valid uses of time, each occupying its place within a repeating cycle that required patience rather than acceleration. This perception reduced anxiety around productivity, allowing individuals to move through daily obligations with steadiness rather than urgency. Daily activities followed familiar sequences that required little conscious planning, as knowledge of when to act had been absorbed through observation across generations. People understood when to begin work, when to pause, and when to wait without needing instruction or measurement, because shared experience had already established expectation. Time was felt through light, temperature, and communal movement rather than through numerical reference, reinforcing a sense of continuity that aligned individual behavior with collective rhythm. This created a calm relationship with time, one in which delay was not failure and stillness was not waste. The absence of strict timekeeping encouraged a slower internal pace, allowing attention to remain focused on immediate tasks rather than future pressure. Without constant reminders of passing minutes, mental effort was directed toward maintaining balance rather than achieving speed. Moments of inactivity were naturally accepted, as waiting formed part of the rhythm rather than an interruption to it. This acceptance of pause contributed to a stable mental environment, supporting endurance across long days without exhaustion or restlessness. Over extended periods, this perception of time reinforced a worldview centered on continuity rather than progression. Life was not understood as a sequence of milestones to be reached quickly, but as a repeating structure that offered reliability and predictability. Through this understanding, individuals experienced their days without constant comparison or urgency, allowing routine to unfold calmly and consistently. Time did not dominate daily life. It accompanied it, moving quietly alongside ordinary activity without demanding attention or control. Seasonal change in ancient Egypt unfolded through patterns that were expected rather than feared, because variation followed a familiar structure that returned in the same order without surprise. The movement from one season to another did not disrupt daily life. Instead, it provided a stable framework within which routine could adjust calmly and gradually. People did not experience seasonal transition as a break from normality, but as an extension of an already understood cycle that required patience rather than reaction. This predictability allowed daily activity to continue with minimal interruption, as preparation replaced urgency and observation replaced anxiety. The agricultural calendar reflected this dependable rhythm, as planting, growth, and rest followed one another without demanding constant attention. Work expanded and contracted according to seasonal expectation, but effort remained measured because the outcome was not uncertain. Knowing that conditions would change again in time reduced pressure to act prematurely, allowing labor to be distributed evenly across long periods rather than concentrated into moments of intensity. Seasonal awareness shaped decision-making quietly, guiding behavior without imposing rigid control or immediate consequence. Environmental cues such as water level, temperature, and light provided sufficient guidance for adjustment, eliminating the need for precise forecasting or complex planning. Because these cues repeated consistently, individuals learned to recognize change through familiarity rather than instruction. Preparation occurred gradually, as tasks shifted in response to subtle environmental signals rather than sudden demand. This approach minimized disruption and maintained continuity, ensuring that daily routine remained recognizable even as conditions evolved. Seasonal predictability also supported psychological steadiness, as the absence of unexpected change reduced stress and mental fatigue. Knowing what would come next allowed attention to remain focused on present activity rather than future concern. Adjustment became a natural response rather than a forced reaction, and this reduced the emotional weight often associated with transition. Life progressed through phases that were acknowledged calmly, allowing individuals to move forward without resistance or apprehension. The repetition of seasonal cycles reinforced a worldview centered on endurance rather than novelty, where stability was valued over transformation. Change was accepted as part of continuity rather than a disruption of it, and this understanding supported long-term sustainability in both labor and rest. Over time, seasonal rhythm became embedded in collective behavior, shaping expectations that required no reinforcement or explanation. Through this steady interaction with predictable change, ancient Egyptian daily life remained balanced, cohesive, and resilient without the need for constant adjustment or control. Daily routine in ancient Egypt developed through repetition rather than instruction, as individuals moved through familiar sequences that required little conscious planning. Ordinary life followed patterns that were learned through observation and shared experience rather than formal scheduling, allowing daily activity to unfold with minimal mental effort. Tasks began and ended without sharp boundaries, because routine was understood as a continuous flow rather than a series of separate obligations. This familiarity reduced decision-making and supported a calm internal pace, enabling individuals to conserve energy across long periods of consistent labor. Morning activity emerged gradually as light increased and temperature shifted, guiding movement without urgency or command. People transitioned into work through habit rather than signal, taking up responsibilities that were already understood and rarely questioned. The order of tasks remained largely consistent, creating a sense of predictability that minimized uncertainty and hesitation. Because daily responsibilities rarely changed abruptly, attention could remain focused on execution rather than preparation, allowing routine to function smoothly without interruption. Work was integrated into daily life without dominating it, as periods of effort were naturally balanced by pauses and slower activity. Ordinary Egyptians did not experience labor as a separate category from living, but as one component of an ongoing rhythm that included rest, observation, and maintenance. This integration prevented exhaustion by spreading effort evenly rather than concentrating it into intense periods. Routine encouraged steadiness rather than acceleration, supporting endurance without requiring constant motivation or reward. Meals preparation and domestic tasks followed similar patterns of repetition, with knowledge passed quietly through shared practice rather than explicit instruction. Familiar tools, methods, and sequences reduced variation, ensuring that daily maintenance required little adjustment over time. Because expectations were clear, cooperation occurred naturally without negotiation or coordination. This consistency supported household stability, allowing individuals to participate in routine without conflict or competition for time or resources. As the day progressed, activity gradually slowed without the need for formal transition, as environmental cues and collective behavior signaled a shift toward reduced effort. Work concluded through completion rather than command, and attention moved toward rest preparation and quiet maintenance. The absence of abrupt endings allowed energy to decline naturally, supporting recovery without sudden disengagement. Evening routine reinforced the same patterns observed earlier, completing a cycle that would repeat with minimal variation the following day. Through continuous repetition, daily routine became embedded in both behavior and expectation, reducing cognitive strain and emotional fluctuation. Ordinary Egyptians relied on familiarity to maintain balance, allowing routine to absorb minor disruption without collapse. Life proceeded through these steady sequences without emphasis on novelty or change, reinforcing a stable rhythm that sustained individuals quietly and consistently over time. Morning life in settlements along the Nile began without abrupt transition, as activity emerged gradually through shared habit rather than directive signal. The shift from rest to movement did not require announcement or coordination, because individuals already understood their place within the daily sequence. Light temperature and familiar sounds provided sufficient context for change, allowing people to rise and begin activity without urgency or disruption. This slow emergence supported a calm internal pace, preserving energy and reducing stress before the day fully unfolded. Households transitioned into motion through repetition of familiar actions, with preparation occurring in an order that rarely varied. Tasks associated with the morning were not negotiated or reconsidered, because they had been performed in the same way across countless days. This consistency reduced the need for decision-making, allowing attention to remain focused on execution rather than planning. Morning routine therefore functioned as a stabilizing structure, guiding behavior quietly while maintaining predictability within the household. Movement through settlement space followed established paths and expectations, as individuals navigated shared areas without congestion or confusion. The absence of urgency prevented overlap and competition for space, allowing activity to remain distributed and orderly. Familiarity with timing reduced the likelihood of interruption, as people naturally adjusted their pace in response to one another. This coordination occurred without instruction or oversight, emerging organically through shared experience and mutual awareness. Early tasks emphasized preparation rather than completion, setting conditions for later activity without demanding immediate result. Tools, materials, and resources were accessed calmly, with no pressure to accelerate progress. Because outcomes were expected rather than uncertain, effort could be applied evenly rather than intensely. Morning labor therefore established continuity rather than achievement, reinforcing the rhythm that would carry through the remainder of the day. The settlement environment supported this gradual beginning through design and habit, as spaces were arranged to accommodate slow movement and repeated use. Courtyard storage areas and shared zones absorbed early activity without disruption, allowing multiple tasks to occur simultaneously without conflict. This spatial familiarity reinforced routine, enabling individuals to act confidently without constant adjustment or vigilance. The environment itself participated in sustaining calm by limiting unnecessary stimulation or change. As morning progressed, activity expanded naturally without distinct boundary between early and later phases. Preparation blended into ongoing work, and responsibility shifted smoothly rather than abruptly. The absence of sharp transition allowed attention to remain steady, preventing fatigue caused by sudden demand. Morning life therefore functioned as an extension of rest rather than its opposite, easing individuals into sustained activity without strain or resistance. Through this gentle beginning, Nile settlements maintained a rhythm that supported endurance across long periods of consistent labor. Morning routine did not aim to energize through stimulation, but to preserve balance through familiarity and predictability. This approach reduced internal friction and supported long-term stability, allowing daily life to proceed calmly and reliably across generations. Household structure in ancient Egypt was shaped by continuity rather than hierarchy, as domestic life operated through familiar roles that rarely required explanation or enforcement. Order within the home did not depend on constant supervision, because expectation had been established through long repetition and shared habit. Each individual understood responsibility through observation rather than instruction, allowing domestic activity to proceed calmly without the need for correction or urgency. This familiarity reduced tension and supported a stable internal rhythm that extended across daily life. Domestic spaces were arranged to support repeated use rather than flexibility, with areas serving consistent functions that changed little over time. Tools, materials, and storage remained in familiar positions, minimizing disruption and reducing the need for conscious adjustment. This spatial consistency allowed household members to move confidently through routine tasks, preserving energy by limiting unnecessary decision-making. Order was therefore maintained through environment as much as behavior, reinforcing calm through predictability and repetition. Roles within the household were defined by practice rather than declaration, as responsibility emerged naturally through participation in shared routine. Tasks were assumed rather than assigned, and cooperation occurred through timing rather than instruction. Because each individual understood when to act and when to pause, coordination required minimal communication or oversight. This quiet alignment supported efficiency without haste, allowing domestic order to function smoothly across long periods without strain. Daily maintenance formed the foundation of household stability, as cleaning, preparation, and repair were integrated into routine rather than treated as separate obligations. These activities occurred gradually and consistently, preventing accumulation or sudden demand. By distributing effort evenly across time, households avoided moments of intense pressure or exhaustion. This approach preserved balance and supported endurance, allowing domestic life to remain steady without interruption or conflict. Household order also shaped emotional stability, as the absence of surprise reduced anxiety and mental fatigue. Familiar sequences provided reassurance, allowing individuals to focus attention on immediate tasks rather than anticipate disruption. Because routine rarely changed abruptly, domestic life offered a reliable structure that supported calm and predictability. This stability extended beyond practical function, influencing perception of time, responsibility, and rest within the household environment. Generational continuity reinforced domestic order, as children absorbed routine through exposure rather than instruction. Observation replaced explanation, allowing knowledge to pass quietly from one generation to the next. This method preserved consistency without formal teaching, ensuring that household structure remained recognizable even as individuals changed. Through shared repetition, domestic order became embedded in collective behavior rather than enforced through authority. Over time, the household functioned as a stabilizing unit within broader society, supporting daily life through quiet consistency rather than visible control. Domestic order reduced friction and preserved energy, enabling individuals to sustain routine across long periods without collapse or resistance. In this way, household structure in ancient Egypt contributed to a calm, durable rhythm that supported both individual well-being and collective stability across generations. Food preparation in ancient Egypt followed routines shaped by repetition rather than variation, as daily meals were produced through familiar sequences that changed little over time. The act of preparing food was not treated as a separate event requiring focus or urgency, but as an integrated part of domestic rhythm that unfolded quietly alongside other responsibilities. Ingredients, methods, and timing were understood through habit rather than instruction, allowing preparation to proceed smoothly without deliberation or stress. Meals were based on consistency rather than choice, as staple foods formed the foundation of daily nourishment across households and generations. Preparation emphasized reliability over novelty, ensuring that effort could be sustained without fatigue or disruption. Because outcomes were predictable, individuals could perform tasks with minimal attention, allowing the mind to remain calm while the body engaged in familiar movement. This predictability reduced cognitive load and supported endurance across repeated cycles of preparation and consumption. The process of food preparation often occurred gradually rather than in concentrated periods, spreading effort evenly throughout the day. Tasks such as grinding, mixing, and shaping were incorporated into routine activity rather than isolated as demanding work. This distribution prevented exhaustion and reduced the need for recovery, enabling food-related labor to coexist comfortably with other domestic responsibilities. Preparation therefore supported continuity rather than interruption, reinforcing the overall rhythm of daily life. Shared knowledge governed the preparation of meals, as techniques were passed through observation rather than explanation. Individuals learned by watching and repeating rather than questioning or experimenting, ensuring that methods remained stable over long periods. This approach preserved efficiency without requiring instruction, allowing each generation to reproduce familiar practices without disruption. Food preparation thus became a vehicle for continuity, embedding routine deeply within household behavior. Daily meals were consumed without ceremony or emphasis, functioning as moments of nourishment rather than focal points of social display. Eating followed established timing and quantity, aligning with routine rather than appetite or occasion. This regularity reduced anticipation and distraction, allowing meals to support energy needs without dominating attention. Consumption blended seamlessly into the flow of daily activity, reinforcing stability rather than marking transition or pause. The tools and spaces used for food preparation further supported calm repetition, as equipment remained consistent in form and placement. Familiar arrangements reduced unnecessary movement and decision-making, allowing tasks to be completed efficiently without conscious adjustment. This environmental consistency reinforced habit, enabling food preparation to occur with minimal variation or disruption. The kitchen or preparation area therefore functioned as a stabilizing space within the household, supporting routine through familiarity and order. Over time, the repetition of food preparation and daily meals contributed to a broader sense of reliability within ancient Egyptian life. Regular nourishment supported physical endurance, while predictable routine supported mental steadiness. The absence of novelty reduced stimulation, allowing daily sustenance to reinforce calm rather than excitement. Through this quiet consistency, food preparation and meals sustained individuals gently and continuously, forming an essential component of daily life without demanding attention or urgency. Bread and beer formed the foundation of daily nutrition in ancient Egypt, not as symbols of abundance or celebration, but as reliable elements that sustained routine without variation or emphasis. These staples were valued for their consistency rather than their appeal, allowing nourishment to support endurance rather than stimulate desire or anticipation. Preparation and consumption followed patterns that were deeply familiar, ensuring that daily intake required little attention or emotional investment. The production of bread and beer was integrated into household routine rather than isolated as specialized labor, unfolding gradually through repeated action rather than concentrated effort. Ingredients were handled in ways that changed little over time, and methods were preserved through habit rather than innovation. This repetition reduced uncertainty and supported efficiency, allowing nourishment to be maintained without disruption or fatigue. Because outcomes were predictable, preparation could occur calmly alongside other responsibilities without demanding focus or urgency. Consumption of these staples followed established timing and quantity, reinforcing stability rather than indulgence. Meals did not function as moments of excitement or distraction, but as quiet intervals that supported continued activity. The absence of variety minimized stimulation, allowing the body to receive nourishment without activating heightened attention or emotional response. This approach aligned with broader daily rhythm, ensuring that eating contributed to balance rather than interruption. The simplicity of daily nutrition also supported psychological steadiness, as predictable meals reduced decision-making and anticipation. Individuals did not need to evaluate options or adjust expectations, because nourishment followed a familiar structure that rarely changed. This consistency reduced mental effort and preserved calm, allowing attention to remain focused on routine activity rather than personal preference. Food therefore functioned as maintenance rather than experience, reinforcing continuity within daily life. Bread and beer were shared across households and communities without emphasis on distinction, reinforcing a sense of common routine rather than hierarchy or display. The shared reliance on these staples reduced variation between individuals, supporting collective rhythm and mutual understanding. Because everyone depended on similar nourishment, daily life remained aligned across social boundaries, minimizing disruption and reinforcing stability. Nutrition thus contributed to social cohesion through sameness rather than differentiation. Preparation spaces and tools further supported this steady pattern, as equipment remained familiar in form, placement, and use. Repetition minimized waste and confusion, allowing nourishment to be produced with minimal adjustment or experimentation. This environmental consistency reinforced habit, ensuring that daily nutrition could be maintained quietly and reliably across long periods. The process required no explanation, only continuation. Over time, the reliance on bread and beer as simple nutrition reinforced a broader worldview centered on sufficiency rather than excess. Sustenance was measured by reliability rather than pleasure, supporting endurance without stimulating demand for change. This approach allowed daily life to proceed with minimal fluctuation, preserving energy and attention for routine responsibilities. Through simplicity and repetition, nutrition in ancient Egypt sustained both body and rhythm quietly and continuously across generations. Everyday clothing in ancient Egypt reflected practicality, continuity, and environmental adaptation rather than decoration or display, as garments were designed to support daily activity without drawing attention or requiring frequent change. Dress functioned as a stable element of routine, providing comfort and familiarity rather than signaling status or individuality in ordinary life. Because clothing forms remained consistent over long periods, individuals experienced dress as an extension of habit rather than a choice requiring consideration or evaluation. Materials used for everyday garments were selected for reliability and suitability to climate, emphasizing breathability, ease of maintenance, and durability. Fabric preparation followed established methods that changed little across generations, ensuring predictable outcomes without experimentation. This consistency reduced uncertainty and preserved efficiency, allowing clothing production to integrate smoothly into domestic routine. Because materials behaved in familiar ways, adjustment was minimal and expectation remained stable throughout daily use. The structure of everyday dress supported movement without restriction, allowing individuals to engage in work and rest without interruption or discomfort. Garments were shaped to accommodate repeated motion rather than specialized tasks, reinforcing versatility within routine activity. This design reduced the need for alteration or replacement, supporting continuity and minimizing disruption. Clothing therefore contributed quietly to endurance by enabling sustained activity without demanding attention or correction. Daily maintenance of clothing followed similar patterns of repetition, as cleaning, repair, and storage were integrated into routine rather than treated as separate concerns. Familiar techniques preserved garments over long periods, preventing accumulation of sudden demand or intense effort. By distributing care evenly across time, households avoided moments of strain associated with neglect or replacement. This approach reinforced calm through predictability, allowing clothing to remain functional without requiring focus or urgency. Everyday dress also supported psychological steadiness, as familiarity in appearance reduced cognitive load and self-awareness. Individuals did not need to assess presentation or make adjustments throughout the day, because clothing fulfilled its role without variation or surprise. This consistency allowed attention to remain directed toward routine tasks rather than personal display. Dress therefore functioned as a stabilizing element within daily life, reinforcing sameness and continuity rather than distinction. Social alignment was reinforced through shared styles and materials, minimizing visual difference and supporting collective rhythm. When clothing followed common patterns, individuals experienced less separation and comparison within the community. This visual continuity reduced social tension and distraction, allowing routine interaction to proceed without emphasis on appearance. Dress thus contributed indirectly to social stability by maintaining uniformity within ordinary life. Over time, the repetition of everyday dress practices reinforced a worldview centered on function rather than expression. Clothing served its purpose quietly and consistently, supporting daily life without inviting change or innovation. This stability preserved energy and attention, enabling individuals to sustain routine across long periods without fatigue or disruption. Through reliable materials, familiar forms, and repeated care, everyday dress in ancient Egypt supported calm, durable continuity across generations. Work in ancient Egypt was organized around endurance rather than speed, as daily labor unfolded through steady repetition rather than bursts of intense effort. Tasks were approached with an understanding that continuity mattered more than rapid completion, allowing individuals to apply energy gradually without pressure to accelerate or compete. This orientation reduced strain and preserved strength, enabling work to remain sustainable across long days and repeated cycles without exhaustion. Labor was distributed according to familiarity and role, not through constant reassessment or urgency-driven demand. Individuals returned to the same forms of work day after day, refining movement through repetition rather than innovation. Because expectations were clear and outcomes predictable, effort could be applied evenly rather than urgently. This consistency allowed work to integrate smoothly into daily rhythm, supporting stability without requiring motivation through stress or reward. The absence of urgency shaped both pace and perception, as time was experienced as available rather than scarce. Workers did not measure progress through speed, but through completion aligned with routine. Delays were not interpreted as failure, because work was understood as part of a larger repeating structure rather than a single decisive moment. This perception reduced anxiety and maintained calm within sustained effort. Physical labor was balanced naturally by pauses and slower phases, allowing recovery to occur without formal scheduling. Moments of reduced activity were accepted as part of work rather than its interruption, preventing fatigue from accumulating unchecked. This balance supported long-term productivity without reliance on pressure or external enforcement. Work therefore remained steady and manageable, preserving both physical and mental resources over time. Tools and methods reinforced this measured approach, as equipment was designed for reliability rather than speed. Familiar techniques minimized error and adjustment, allowing tasks to proceed smoothly without constant correction. Because processes changed little, learning occurred through repetition rather than instruction, embedding efficiency quietly within routine. This stability reduced disruption and preserved confidence, enabling individuals to engage in labor without heightened attention or strain. Social expectations further supported work without urgency, as collective rhythm aligned individual pace with community behavior. When everyone moved steadily rather than quickly, pressure to accelerate diminished naturally. Cooperation emerged through shared timing rather than direction, reinforcing calm through mutual alignment. This collective steadiness prevented competition and reduced conflict, allowing work to function as a cohesive component of daily life. Over time, this approach to labor reinforced a worldview centered on sustainability rather than achievement. Work was valued for its contribution to continuity rather than for immediate result or recognition. This perspective preserved energy and attention, allowing daily life to proceed without escalation or tension. Through steady pace, repeated effort, and shared rhythm, work in ancient Egypt supported a calm, durable routine that endured quietly across generations. Agricultural labor in ancient Egypt followed a steady rhythm shaped by expectation rather than urgency, as farming activity unfolded according to familiar cycles that returned reliably over time. Work in the fields did not demand constant acceleration or reaction, because the environment itself provided guidance through gradual change rather than sudden demand. Farmers approached their tasks with patience rather than intensity, allowing effort to be distributed evenly across long periods without exhaustion or strain. The preparation of land occurred through repeated motion and established technique, with movements refined through habit rather than innovation. Tools were used in consistent ways that minimized adjustment and reduced the need for conscious focus. Because the outcome of agricultural labor was expected rather than uncertain, work could proceed calmly without pressure to rush or overextend effort. This predictability supported endurance and preserved energy across days that required sustained attention rather than rapid output. Planting and maintenance followed sequences that changed little from one season to the next, reinforcing familiarity and reducing cognitive load. Farmers understood when to act and when to wait through observation rather than instruction, allowing activity to align naturally with environmental cues. This alignment reduced frustration and prevented unnecessary effort, ensuring that labor remained balanced and manageable. Agricultural work therefore functioned as a continuation of routine rather than a disruptive demand within daily life. Quiet repetition defined much of the labor associated with cultivation, as tasks such as tending, monitoring, and maintaining fields occurred gradually without visible intensity. These activities required presence rather than speed, encouraging a steady internal pace that matched physical movement. Because progress unfolded slowly, attention remained focused on immediate action rather than distant outcome. This focus reduced anxiety and supported calm engagement with work that extended across long periods without interruption. Rest and reduced activity were naturally integrated into agricultural routine, as periods of exertion were followed by moments of stillness without formal separation. Shade pauses and slower phases occurred organically in response to physical cues rather than imposed schedules. This balance prevented fatigue from accumulating and preserved strength for continued effort. Agricultural labor therefore supported sustainability through moderation rather than intensity, allowing work to remain consistent without overwhelming the individual. Social coordination within farming communities reinforced this measured approach, as collective rhythm aligned individual effort with shared timing. When everyone moved according to the same pace, pressure to accelerate diminished and cooperation emerged naturally. Tasks were completed through alignment rather than instruction, reducing conflict and maintaining calm across shared labor. This collective steadiness ensured that agricultural work remained integrated within community life without introducing tension or competition. Over time, the repetition of quiet agricultural labor reinforced a worldview centered on patience and continuity. Farming was valued not for speed or yield alone, but for its role in sustaining life steadily across seasons. This perspective preserved energy and attention, allowing individuals to engage in labor without urgency or fear of delay. Through predictable cycles, familiar movement, and shared rhythm, agricultural work in ancient Egypt supported a calm, durable routine that endured quietly across generations. Craft work in ancient Egypt developed through steady repetition rather than creative urgency, as skilled hands followed established techniques that changed little over long periods. The value of craft lay in reliability and familiarity rather than innovation, allowing production to proceed calmly without pressure to alter form or method. Artisans approached their work with patience rather than intensity, refining movement through habit and muscle memory rather than conscious experimentation. This approach preserved energy and focus, enabling skill to be sustained quietly across daily routine. Tools used in craft work were simple and consistent, designed to support repeated motion rather than speed or variation. Familiar equipment reduced the need for adjustment and correction, allowing attention to remain steady rather than alert. Because methods were well understood, work could continue without interruption or heightened awareness. This consistency allowed craft labor to integrate smoothly into daily life, functioning as a dependable component of routine rather than a demanding specialty. Learning occurred through observation and imitation rather than formal instruction, as younger individuals absorbed technique by watching skilled hands at work. Repetition replaced explanation, ensuring that knowledge passed gradually and reliably from one generation to the next. This method preserved continuity without introducing disruption or uncertainty, allowing craft traditions to remain stable over long spans of time. Skill therefore became embedded within routine rather than isolated as exceptional ability. Craft production followed measured pacing that aligned with broader daily rhythm, avoiding concentration of effort into intense periods. Tasks unfolded step by step without pressure to accelerate, allowing accuracy and endurance to develop together. Because outcomes were expected rather than uncertain, artisans could apply effort evenly without anxiety about result. This calm approach reduced fatigue and preserved consistency, supporting sustained production without strain or error. Workspaces were arranged to support repeated use and familiarity, with materials and tools positioned to minimize unnecessary movement. This spatial order reduced distraction and decision-making, allowing work to proceed smoothly without conscious adjustment. Environmental consistency reinforced habit, enabling skilled hands to function efficiently while attention remained relaxed. The workspace itself therefore contributed to calm by supporting repetition rather than variation. Social recognition of craft work emphasized contribution rather than distinction, as artisans fulfilled expected roles within community routine. Craft did not demand constant evaluation or display, because its purpose was understood and its value stable. This reduced pressure to perform or compete, allowing skilled labor to remain grounded within ordinary life. Cooperation and alignment replaced comparison, reinforcing steadiness across shared production. Over time, the repetition of craft work reinforced a worldview centered on mastery through continuity rather than achievement through change. Skill was valued for its reliability and endurance, supporting daily life without drawing attention to itself. This perspective preserved calm and focus, allowing craft traditions to persist quietly across generations. Through steady hands, familiar tools, and repeated motion, craft work in ancient Egypt sustained routine and stability without urgency or disruption. The role of the scribe in ancient Egypt functioned as a stabilizing presence rather than a position of authority or urgency, as record-keeping supported continuity without demanding constant attention or reaction. Writing and documentation were integrated into routine life quietly, allowing information to be preserved without disrupting the steady flow of daily activity. The scribe worked within established structures that emphasized consistency and accuracy rather than speed, ensuring that records reflected order rather than eventfulness. Training for scribal work emphasized patience, observation, and repetition, as skill developed gradually through long exposure to familiar forms and symbols. Learning occurred through copying and refinement rather than instruction or debate, allowing knowledge to settle through practice rather than explanation. This method reduced variation and preserved uniformity, ensuring that written records remained consistent across time and location. The gradual development of skill supported calm focus and reduced mental strain, enabling sustained attention without fatigue. Daily scribal activity followed predictable sequences that changed little from one day to the next, reinforcing familiarity and reducing cognitive demand. Tasks such as listing, recording, and organizing information unfolded steadily without pressure to accelerate, because accuracy mattered more than immediacy. This emphasis allowed work to proceed with minimal interruption, supporting endurance rather than intensity. The scribe therefore contributed to stability by maintaining order quietly rather than responding to change dramatically. The environment in which scribes worked reinforced this measured pace, as spaces were arranged to support concentration and repetition rather than stimulation. Tools, materials, and surfaces remained familiar, minimizing distraction and allowing attention to remain steady. Environmental consistency reduced the need for adjustment, enabling scribes to work calmly across long periods without mental exhaustion. This quiet workspace supported continuity by encouraging focus without urgency. Scribal records served to reinforce routine rather than commemorate exception, documenting resources, schedules, and transactions that repeated regularly. By capturing ordinary activity rather than singular events, writing contributed to predictability and shared understanding. This function supported coordination without command, allowing systems to operate smoothly through reference rather than instruction. The scribe therefore acted as a quiet facilitator of order, ensuring that information remained accessible without becoming intrusive. Social perception of the scribe emphasized reliability rather than prominence, as their work supported daily life without visible intervention. The value of scribal labor lay in its steadiness and accuracy, not in innovation or expression. This reduced pressure to perform or compete, allowing scribes to maintain calm focus within their role. Integration within routine prevented isolation and preserved balance between responsibility and rest. Over time, the repetition of scribal work reinforced a worldview centered on preservation rather than transformation. Writing served to maintain continuity across generations, supporting stability without accelerating change. This perspective preserved calm and reduced urgency, allowing information to move quietly alongside daily life rather than directing it. Through steady attention, repeated practice, and familiar structure, the role of the scribe in ancient Egypt sustained order and continuity without disruption or strain. Trade exchange in ancient Egypt functioned as a steady extension of daily routine rather than a disruptive event, as local markets operated through familiarity and repetition instead of negotiation or urgency. Exchange followed known patterns that changed little over time, allowing goods to move through communities without demanding heightened attention or rapid decision-making. Participation in trade did not require constant evaluation or strategy, because value and expectation were already understood through shared experience and long-standing custom. Local markets emerged as predictable gathering points where timing and behavior aligned naturally, reducing the need for formal organization or oversight. Individuals arrived with clear understanding of what was exchanged and how interaction would unfold, minimizing uncertainty and reducing mental effort. Because outcomes were expected rather than contested, trade proceeded calmly without pressure to compete or accelerate. This predictability allowed exchange to integrate smoothly into daily life without disrupting routine or increasing stress. Goods circulated through barter and customary practice rather than immediate gain, reinforcing balance rather than accumulation. Items exchanged reflected necessity and maintenance rather than novelty or excess, ensuring that trade supported continuity instead of stimulation. The absence of aggressive bargaining preserved calm and cooperation, allowing interaction to remain measured and brief. Exchange therefore functioned as a maintenance activity rather than a focal event within the day. Movement of goods between settlements occurred gradually through familiar routes and schedules, aligning with broader rhythms of travel and work. Transport followed known paths that required little adjustment, reducing disruption and preserving energy. Because trade routes were stable and predictable, exchange could occur without constant vigilance or adaptation. This stability supported endurance and reduced friction across repeated journeys and interactions. The social environment of local markets reinforced routine rather than excitement, as behavior followed established norms that limited variation. Interaction remained functional and restrained, preventing escalation or distraction. Familiarity among participants reduced the need for explanation or negotiation, allowing transactions to complete efficiently without tension. This environment preserved calm by maintaining consistency in both behavior and expectation. Market spaces themselves contributed to steadiness through simple arrangement and repeated use, as locations and layouts remained recognizable across time. The physical environment reduced confusion and unnecessary movement, enabling exchange to occur smoothly without congestion or urgency. Environmental familiarity reinforced habit, allowing participants to navigate space confidently while maintaining a relaxed internal pace. Over time, the repetition of trade exchange reinforced a worldview centered on balance and sufficiency rather than expansion or competition. Exchange served to sustain daily life rather than transform it, supporting routine without demanding change or attention. This perspective preserved calm and alignment within communities, allowing markets to function quietly alongside other daily activities. Through predictable interaction, familiar routes, and steady practice, trade and local markets in ancient Egypt maintained continuity without disturbance across generations. Movement and travel along the Nile unfolded as a natural extension of daily routine, rather than a separate activity requiring urgency or preparation. As the river provided a familiar path that guided motion calmly and predictably, travel did not introduce disruption into ordinary life, because routes, timing, and purpose were already understood through long repetition and shared expectation. Individuals approached movement with patience rather than haste, allowing journeys to blend into routine without demanding heightened attention or emotional investment. The river shaped perception of distance and effort, as travel occurred gradually through steady progression rather than rapid transition. Boats moved at a measured pace that matched the rhythm of the environment, reducing pressure to arrive quickly or maximize efficiency. This slow movement encouraged acceptance of duration rather than resistance to it, allowing travelers to remain calm and observant without feeling delayed or constrained. Travel therefore functioned as a continuation of daily life rather than a break from it. Routes along the Nile were stable and familiar, minimizing uncertainty and reducing the need for navigation or adjustment. Knowledge of when and where to move was absorbed through observation rather than instruction, enabling individuals to travel confidently without planning or anxiety. This familiarity reduced cognitive load and preserved energy, allowing attention to remain relaxed while movement unfolded steadily. Travel became predictable and reliable, supporting continuity rather than novelty or exploration. Movement of people, goods, and information occurred quietly through repeated journeys rather than dramatic passage, reinforcing routine across settlements. Exchange did not depend on speed, but on consistency and alignment with established rhythm. Because journeys repeated the same patterns, interaction between communities remained steady without introducing tension or competition. Travel therefore supported social cohesion by maintaining connection without imposing urgency or disruption. Periods of stillness were naturally integrated into travel, as pauses and slower phases occurred in response to environmental cues rather than imposed schedules. Rest was accepted as part of movement rather than its interruption, preventing fatigue and preserving strength across longer journeys. This balance reduced strain and supported endurance, allowing travel to remain manageable and calm without requiring external regulation. Movement and rest flowed together as complementary phases within the same rhythm. The physical environment reinforced this calm approach to travel, as the riverbanks and landing areas were shaped by repeated use rather than adaptation. Familiar spaces reduced uncertainty and unnecessary motion, allowing arrivals and departures to occur smoothly without congestion or confusion. Environmental consistency supported habit, enabling movement to proceed quietly without drawing attention or creating disturbance. Over time, repeated travel along the Nile reinforced a worldview centered on continuity rather than destination. Journeys were valued for their role in maintaining connection rather than for speed or novelty. This perspective preserved calm and reduced urgency, allowing movement to support daily life without dominating it. Through steady pace, familiar routes, and shared expectation, movement and travel along the river sustained ancient Egyptian routine quietly and reliably across generations. Boats and water transportation in ancient Egypt operated as a quiet extension of daily routine rather than a specialized system focused on speed or efficiency. as journeys along the Nile unfolded through steady motion, shaped by familiarity and expectation. Water travel did not represent escape or transition, but continuity, allowing people, goods, and messages to move without disrupting the rhythm of ordinary life. Because boats followed predictable paths and schedules, movement remained calm and required little conscious attention or preparation. The design of boats reflected practicality and repetition rather than innovation, supporting stable movement over long periods with minimal adjustment. Construction methods remained consistent, allowing vessels to behave in expected ways that reduced uncertainty during travel. Familiarity with these boats allowed individuals to trust the process of movement without vigilance, preserving calm and reducing mental strain. Travel, therefore, became a passive experience rather than an active challenge, aligning naturally with the broader pace of daily life. Journeys along the river progressed slowly and evenly, encouraging acceptance of duration rather than resistance to it. The absence of urgency allowed attention to soften, as travelers did not need to monitor progress continuously or anticipate rapid change. Movement occurred through gradual advance rather than sudden shift, reinforcing a perception of time as expansive rather than compressed. This steady pace supported relaxation and endurance, allowing journeys to unfold without tension or fatigue. Transportation of goods followed similar patterns of predictability, as materials were moved according to routine rather than demand. The reliability of water routes reduced pressure to accelerate delivery, ensuring that exchange remained balanced and sustainable. Because movement was expected rather than urgent, coordination occurred naturally without enforcement or oversight. This stability allowed trade and supply to function quietly alongside daily life without drawing attention or causing disruption. Periods of stillness were naturally integrated into boat travel, as pauses occurred in response to environment rather than imposed structure. Waiting drift and slow adjustment formed part of the journey rather than its interruption, preventing fatigue and preserving energy. This integration of motion and rest supported long-term sustainability, allowing repeated journeys to remain manageable without strain. Travel therefore maintained balance by accommodating both movement and pause within the same rhythm. The environment of the river reinforced this calm experience, as water surface, horizon, and shoreline provided consistent visual reference without stimulation. Familiar landmarks reduced uncertainty and allowed orientation without effort, enabling travelers to remain relaxed throughout the journey. The absence of visual complexity supported a steady internal state, aligning perception with motion rather than excitement or anticipation. The river itself participated in sustaining calm through repetition and openness. Over time, repeated slow journeys shaped a worldview in which movement was valued for reliability rather than destination. Boats served as tools of continuity rather than transformation, supporting connection without urgency or disruption. This perspective preserved calm and reduced pressure, allowing transportation to function as a quiet thread woven through daily life. Through steady motion, familiar vessels, and predictable routes, boat travel in ancient Egypt sustained routine and connection gently and consistently across generations. Social order in ancient Egypt emerged through familiarity and shared expectation, rather than strict enforcement or visible authority, as community roles were understood through repetition and observation across daily life. Individuals did not constantly reassess their position or responsibility, because place within the social structure was absorbed gradually through participation rather than instruction. This quiet understanding reduced friction and uncertainty, allowing daily interaction to proceed calmly without negotiation or tension. Community roles were defined by function rather than status, emphasizing contribution over distinction. People engaged in tasks that supported collective routine without seeking recognition or change, reinforcing stability rather than competition. Because responsibilities followed predictable patterns, cooperation occurred naturally without coordination or oversight. This alignment allowed social order to sustain itself quietly, relying on habit rather than command to maintain balance. Interaction within the community followed familiar rhythms that limited variation and reduced cognitive effort, as behavior aligned with shared expectation rather than individual preference. Social encounters were brief, functional, and predictable, preventing escalation or emotional demand. This consistency preserved calm by minimizing surprise and misunderstanding, allowing individuals to navigate communal spaces with confidence and ease. Community life therefore supported routine rather than stimulation, reinforcing steadiness within daily experience. Generational continuity played a central role in maintaining social order, as knowledge of roles passed through observation rather than formal teaching. Younger members absorbed expectation by watching elders participate in routine activity, internalizing behavior without explicit instruction. This method preserved consistency and reduced disruption, ensuring that social structure remained recognizable even as individuals changed. The gradual transmission of roles supported stability without requiring reinforcement or correction. The absence of rigid hierarchy in everyday interaction reduced pressure and conflict, allowing cooperation to replace competition. While differences in responsibility existed, they were integrated into routine rather than emphasized through display or authority. This subtle distinction maintained order without tension, allowing individuals to fulfill roles without fear of transgression or evaluation. Social balance was therefore preserved through alignment rather than control. Community spaces reinforced this calm structure through repeated use and familiar arrangement, as paths, gathering areas, and shared zones encouraged predictable movement and interaction. Environmental consistency reduced confusion and overlap, enabling individuals to anticipate behavior without vigilance. This spatial order supported social rhythm by guiding interaction quietly rather than directing it overtly. The environment itself participated in sustaining social balance through familiarity and repetition. Over time, the repetition of shared roles and behaviors reinforced a worldview centered on continuity and mutual reliance. Social order was valued for its stability rather than its capacity to change or expand, preserving calm and reducing urgency within collective life. Individuals moved through community with confidence rooted in familiarity, allowing daily life to proceed without disruption or strain. Through shared expectation, repeated participation, and environmental consistency, social order and community roles in ancient Egypt sustained routine and balance gently across generations. Family structure in ancient Egypt functioned as a stable framework that emphasized continuity rather than hierarchy or rapid change. As households operated through shared routine, passed quietly from one generation to the next. Family roles were not constantly redefined or questioned, because responsibility and expectation were absorbed gradually through daily participation rather than formal instruction. This continuity reduced uncertainty and supported calm interaction within the household, allowing family life to proceed without tension or negotiation. Generational relationships were shaped by familiarity and repetition, as children learned behavior and responsibility by observing elders rather than receiving direct guidance. Daily routine provided a consistent model that required no explanation, allowing knowledge to settle naturally through exposure. This method preserved stability and reduced disruption, ensuring that family structure remained recognizable even as individuals aged and roles shifted over time. Continuity was therefore maintained through presence rather than enforcement. Household activity reinforced generational alignment through shared participation in routine tasks, as individuals of different ages contributed according to ability rather than status. This integration reduced separation and strengthened cohesion, allowing family members to move through daily life with mutual understanding. Because tasks followed predictable patterns, cooperation occurred naturally without instruction or oversight. Family structure thus functioned as a quiet system of alignment rather than a visible authority hierarchy. The absence of abrupt transition within family roles supported emotional steadiness, as individuals moved gradually from one phase of life to another without sudden reassignment. Change occurred through accumulation rather than declaration, reducing anxiety and preserving balance. This gradual progression allowed identity and responsibility to evolve without conflict or resistance, supporting long-term stability within the household. Family life therefore absorbed change gently rather than reacting to it sharply. Shared space and routine reinforced generational continuity through environmental familiarity, as homes were arranged to support repeated use rather than adaptation. Familiar paths, storage areas, and domestic zones guided behavior without instruction, enabling individuals to act confidently within shared space. Environmental consistency reduced cognitive load and preserved calm, allowing family members to focus attention on routine rather than adjustment. The household environment itself participated in maintaining continuity through repetition and order. Family interaction emphasized maintenance rather than expression, as daily engagement centered on cooperation and shared responsibility rather than emotional display. This restrained interaction reduced stimulation and preserved calm, allowing relationships to remain steady without conflict or intensity. Familiar behavior patterns minimized misunderstanding and friction, supporting harmony through predictability rather than negotiation. Family bonds were reinforced through repeated presence rather than overt affirmation. Over time, the repetition of shared routine and gradual role transition reinforced a worldview centered on endurance and mutual reliance. Family structure was valued for its stability rather than its capacity for change, preserving calm across generations. Individuals experienced belonging through familiarity and participation rather than distinction or authority. Through shared routine, environmental consistency, and gradual progression, family structure and generational continuity in ancient Egypt sustained daily life quietly and reliably across long periods of time. Childhood learning in ancient Egypt unfolded through observation and gradual participation, rather than formal instruction or structured teaching. As children absorbed knowledge by watching daily routine repeat itself across time. Learning did not occur in isolated moments or designated spaces, but through continuous exposure to familiar tasks, behaviors, and rhythms that surrounded everyday life. This method reduced pressure and expectation, allowing understanding to develop quietly without urgency or evaluation. Children moved alongside adults within routine activity, observing repetition and internalizing sequence without direct explanation. Tasks were not assigned abruptly or demanded prematurely, but approached gradually as familiarity increased. This slow integration allowed confidence to develop naturally, as learning occurred through presence rather than correction. Mistakes were absorbed into repetition rather than highlighted, preserving calm and reducing anxiety during the learning process. Knowledge passed through consistent exposure to environment and behavior rather than verbal instruction, enabling children to recognize patterns without conscious effort. Repetition reinforced understanding quietly, allowing skills to emerge through habit rather than memorization. This approach minimized cognitive strain and preserved focus, supporting steady learning across long periods without fatigue or resistance. Childhood education therefore aligned with routine rather than interrupting it. Learning through observation encouraged patience rather than speed, as progress unfolded gradually without fixed milestones or deadlines. Children were not measured against immediate outcome, but integrated into routine according to readiness and familiarity. This absence of evaluation reduced stress and comparison, allowing development to proceed at a natural pace without competition. Growth occurred through accumulation rather than achievement, reinforcing calm and continuity within daily life. Shared environment played a central role in supporting observational learning, as domestic and communal spaces remained consistent and predictable. Familiar layouts, tools, and paths guided behavior without instruction, allowing children to anticipate action through repetition. Environmental stability reduced confusion and preserved confidence, enabling learning to occur effortlessly alongside routine activity. The environment itself became a silent teacher through repetition and consistency. Social interaction further reinforced learning through observation, as children witnessed cooperation and role fulfillment within the community. Behavior norms and expectations were absorbed through exposure rather than enforcement, allowing understanding to settle gradually. This method preserved harmony and reduced confrontation, supporting smooth integration of younger members into community life. Learning therefore functioned as a shared process rather than an individual challenge. Over time, the repetition of observational learning reinforced a worldview centered on continuity and patience. Knowledge was valued for its stability rather than its novelty, supporting long-term reliability over rapid change. Children matured into roles through familiarity rather than instruction, preserving calm and reducing disruption across generations. Through repeated exposure shared routine and environmental consistency. Childhood learning in ancient Egypt sustained daily life quietly and effectively without urgency or strain. Health and daily care in ancient Egypt were maintained through routine and familiarity rather than intervention or urgent response, as well-being was supported quietly through repeated practices embedded in ordinary life. Care did not revolve around sudden treatment or dramatic correction, but around steady maintenance that reduced the likelihood of imbalance over time. This approach allowed individuals to attend to health without anxiety or heightened awareness, integrating care naturally into daily rhythm rather than isolating it as a separate concern. Hygiene practices followed established habits that required little conscious planning, as washing, cleaning, and maintenance occurred regularly through repetition rather than instruction. Familiar sequences reduced uncertainty and preserved calm, allowing care to proceed without pressure or evaluation. Because these actions were expected and predictable, they could be performed gently and consistently without drawing attention or disrupting routine. Hygiene therefore functioned as preservation rather than repair, supporting stability sustained over long periods. Daily care extended beyond physical cleanliness to include rest, shade, and moderation of effort, as individuals learned to respond to bodily cues through observation rather than command. Balance was maintained through gradual adjustment rather than abrupt intervention, preventing exhaustion and preserving strength. This attentiveness to condition occurred quietly within routine activity, allowing care to coexist with labor rather than interrupt it. The body was treated as part of the rhythm rather than a system requiring constant correction. Environmental consistency supported health through predictable conditions, as homes and communal spaces were arranged to minimize strain and unnecessary exertion. Familiar layouts reduced risk and preserved ease of movement, allowing individuals to navigate space without vigilance. Shade, water access, and airflow were integrated into daily surroundings, supporting comfort without conscious effort. The environment itself participated in maintaining health by reinforcing moderation and stability through design and habit. Knowledge related to care and hygiene was transmitted through observation rather than formal teaching, as individuals learned by watching routine practices repeat across generations. This method preserved consistency and reduced variation, ensuring that care practices remained reliable over time. Because learning occurred gradually and without emphasis, individuals absorbed understanding without anxiety or pressure. Health knowledge therefore settled quietly into routine rather than standing apart as specialized instruction. Social alignment further reinforced daily care, as shared behavior established collective norms that supported moderation and balance. Individuals adjusted activity in response to communal rhythm rather than individual urgency, reducing strain and preserving harmony. Care became a shared responsibility embedded within routine rather than a private concern requiring attention or display. This collective steadiness reduced stress and supported well-being across the community. Over time, the repetition of daily care practices reinforced a worldview centered on maintenance rather than cure. Health was valued as a state to be preserved quietly rather than restored dramatically, supporting calm and reducing urgency within daily life. Individuals moved through routine with confidence rooted in familiarity and balance, allowing well-being to remain stable without constant attention. Through repeated hygiene, steady care, and environmental consistency, health and daily care in ancient Egypt sustained life gently and continuously across generations. Midday rest in ancient Egypt emerged naturally from environmental conditions rather than imposed structure, as heat and light encouraged a gradual slowing of activity without requiring instruction or enforcement. The transition toward stillness did not interrupt daily life, but redirected it toward reduced effort and quiet maintenance. Individuals adjusted pace through familiarity with the environment rather than conscious decision, allowing rest to occur as an extension of routine rather than a separate phase. Shade played a central role in supporting midday calm, as spaces were arranged to provide relief without signaling cessation of responsibility. Courtyards' walls and overhangs absorbed light and moderated temperature, creating areas where activity could continue at a gentler pace. This environmental design reduced physical strain and preserved energy, allowing individuals to remain present without exertion. Rest therefore became a condition shaped by surroundings rather than an action requiring permission or timing. Midday stillness did not imply inactivity, but a shift toward minimal movement and reduced demand. Tasks that required strength or sustained effort were naturally postponed, while lighter maintenance continued without urgency. This adjustment occurred quietly through shared understanding rather than directive command, preserving calm within the flow of daily life. Stillness functioned as moderation rather than pause, supporting endurance across long periods of routine activity. Social alignment reinforced this rhythm of rest, as communal behavior signaled when to slow and when to resume without formal coordination. Individuals mirrored one another's pace, allowing collective stillness to emerge organically. This alignment reduced pressure to maintain productivity during peak heat, preserving harmony and preventing exhaustion. Rest was therefore normalized through shared behavior rather than designated schedule, integrating seamlessly into daily experience. The psychological effect of midday stillness supported balance by reducing stimulation and sensory demand, allowing attention to soften without disengaging completely. Quiet surroundings and reduced motion limited distraction, creating conditions that encouraged mental ease and recovery. This environment allowed individuals to remain alert without strain, preserving clarity while conserving energy. Midday calm therefore contributed to both physical and mental sustainability within routine life. Domestic and communal spaces absorbed this stillness through repeated use and familiar arrangement, as shaded areas became predictable points of reduced activity. Environmental consistency minimized confusion and supported confidence, enabling individuals to move into rest without hesitation or planning. These spaces functioned as stabilizing elements within the day, reinforcing rhythm through repetition rather than variation. Stillness became embedded within place as much as within behavior. Over time, the repetition of midday rest reinforced a worldview centered on balance and moderation. Activity and stillness were understood as complementary phases within the same rhythm rather than opposing states. This understanding preserved calm and reduced urgency, allowing daily life to continue without exhaustion or escalation. Through shade, environmental familiarity, and shared pacing, rest and midday stillness in ancient Egypt sustained endurance and stability quietly across generations. Religion in ancient Egypt functioned as a continuous routine embedded within daily life, rather than a separate sphere demanding heightened emotion or urgent attention. As belief was expressed through repetition, familiarity, and presence, rather than dramatic ritual. Religious practice did not interrupt ordinary activity. Instead, it accompanied it quietly, allowing spiritual alignment to occur alongside work, rest, and maintenance without requiring transition or preparation. This integration reduced tension and preserved calm, enabling belief to remain stable and dependable rather than stimulating or demanding. Ritual actions were performed through habit rather than emphasis, as gestures, offerings, and acknowledgments followed known sequences that changed little over time. Individuals did not approach religious practice as a moment of personal expression or revelation, but as a maintenance activity that reinforced order and continuity. Because outcomes were not expected to vary, participation required little emotional investment or anticipation. This predictability allowed religious routine to support stability rather than provoke intensity or distraction. Daily religious behavior occurred in small, repeated actions rather than singular events, reinforcing alignment without drawing focus away from ordinary responsibility. Brief acknowledgments and familiar observances blended into routine movement, allowing belief to remain present without dominating attention. This subtle presence reduced the need for conscious reflection or decision-making, preserving mental ease and continuity. Religion, therefore, functioned as a background structure that supported routine rather than directing it overtly. Learning religious practice followed the same observational model as other aspects of daily life, as individuals absorbed behavior through exposure rather than instruction. Children and newcomers learned by watching repetition rather than receiving explanation, ensuring that practice remained consistent and unchallenged. This method preserved uniformity and reduced variation, allowing belief to persist quietly across generations. Understanding emerged gradually through participation rather than declaration, reinforcing calm and continuity. Sacred concepts were reinforced through regular presence rather than formal teaching, as symbols, spaces, and actions remained familiar and stable. This consistency reduced uncertainty and preserved confidence, allowing individuals to engage without heightened awareness or emotional demand. Religion did not require constant reaffirmation or interpretation, because its role within routine was already established. This reduced pressure and supported endurance within both belief and daily life. Social alignment further supported religion as routine practice, as shared observance reinforced collective rhythm without requiring coordination. Individuals mirrored one another's actions naturally, allowing participation to occur without instruction or enforcement. This alignment preserved harmony and minimized disruption, enabling belief to support community cohesion quietly rather than assertively. Religious practice therefore functioned as a stabilizing element within social life, rather than a focal point of interaction. Over time, the repetition of religious routine reinforced a worldview centered on order, continuity, and balance. Belief was valued for its capacity to maintain stability rather than inspire change or intensity, preserving calm within daily experience. Individuals moved through life with confidence grounded in familiar practice rather than emotional conviction. Through repeated gestures, shared presence, and quiet alignment, religion as routine practice in ancient Egypt sustained daily life gently and consistently across generations. Temples in ancient Egypt existed as familiar elements within the landscape rather than distant or extraordinary destinations, as their presence was woven into everyday movement and routine. They did not stand apart from daily life as places requiring special preparation or heightened awareness, but functioned as stable reference points that supported continuity and order. Individuals encountered temples regularly through ordinary activity, allowing these spaces to feel familiar rather than imposing or demanding attention. Daily interaction with temples occurred through repeated exposure rather than focused engagement, as people passed near sacred structures while attending to routine tasks. This proximity reduced the sense of separation between sacred and ordinary, allowing belief and daily responsibility to coexist without tension. The temple became part of the environment rather than a focal event, reinforcing calm by remaining constant and predictable within the community. Activities associated with temples followed established patterns that changed little over time, reinforcing familiarity and reducing cognitive effort. Offerings, maintenance, and presence occurred through repetition rather than ceremony, allowing participation without emotional intensity or anticipation. Because these actions were expected rather than exceptional, individuals could engage without disruption to routine. The temple therefore supported alignment and continuity without demanding attention or altering pace. The physical structure of temples reinforced this quiet integration, as architecture emphasized stability and permanence over movement or spectacle. Massive forms and repeated layouts created a sense of reliability, anchoring daily experience within a familiar visual framework. This consistency reduced uncertainty and preserved calm, allowing individuals to orient themselves without conscious effort. The temple served as a constant element within the environment, supporting steadiness through presence rather than activity. Social interaction around temples remained restrained and predictable, as behavior followed known norms that limited variation. People moved through these spaces without urgency or display, allowing shared understanding to guide interaction quietly. This consistency preserved harmony and prevented escalation, enabling communal presence without emotional demand. The temple environment therefore reinforced routine rather than stimulating engagement or gathering attention. Learning associated with temples occurred gradually through observation and repetition, as individuals absorbed expected behavior by watching others engage calmly. No instruction was required to understand how to move or act within these spaces, because Familiarity had already established expectation. This observational learning preserved uniformity and reduced disruption, ensuring that temple interaction remained stable across generations. Understanding settled quietly into routine rather than standing apart as formal teaching. Over time, the continual presence of temples within daily life reinforced a worldview centered on permanence and balance. Sacred space was valued for its reliability rather than its capacity to inspire awe or change, supporting calm through constancy. Individuals experienced the temple as part of their environment rather than as an event, allowing belief to remain steady without dominating attention. Through repeated presence, familiar movement, and environmental stability, temples, as part of daily life in ancient Egypt, sustained routine and order gently across generations. Nightfall along the Nile arrived gradually rather than suddenly, as light faded and activity softened without requiring instruction or announcement. The transition from day to night did not disrupt routine, but eased it toward reduced motion and quieter presence. Individuals adjusted behavior through familiarity with environmental cues rather than conscious decision, allowing evening to unfold as a natural extension of the day rather than a separate phase. As darkness increased, movement slowed and attention narrowed toward immediate surroundings. Tasks that required strength or visibility concluded naturally, while quieter forms of maintenance continued without urgency. This adjustment occurred through shared understanding rather than coordination, preserving calm and preventing abrupt interruption. Nightfall therefore functioned as moderation rather than cessation, supporting continuity within daily rhythm. The environment played a central role in guiding this transition, as cooling air, dimming light, and reduced noise signaled a shift toward stillness. These cues were predictable and repeated nightly, allowing individuals to anticipate change without vigilance or planning. Familiarity with the pattern reduced uncertainty and preserved confidence, enabling routine to adapt smoothly without stress. The landscape itself participated in maintaining rhythm through gradual change rather than sudden contrast. Domestic spaces absorbed nightfall through repeated use and arrangement, as interiors and courtyards were suited to reduced activity and quieter presence. Familiar layouts minimized movement and decision-making, allowing individuals to settle without effort or adjustment. Environmental consistency supported calm by limiting stimulation and distraction, enabling attention to soften naturally as evening progressed. The home therefore became a stabilizing space where night could arrive without disruption. Social interaction during nightfall remained restrained and predictable, as communal behavior aligned toward reduced engagement and minimal demand. Conversation, movement, and activity diminished without explicit agreement, reflecting shared understanding of time and condition. This alignment prevented escalation and preserved harmony, allowing individuals to withdraw gradually without social pressure. Evening, therefore, reinforced collective rhythm through quiet coordination rather than instruction. Psychological effects of nightfall supported balance by reducing sensory input and mental demand, encouraging relaxation without disengagement. The absence of sudden change allowed the mind to remain steady rather than alert, easing transition toward rest. This gradual softening reduced internal tension and preserved continuity between waking activity and rest. Nightfall thus functioned as a buffer that protected calm across the shift from day to night. Over time, the repetition of evening transition reinforced a worldview centered on gradual change and predictable rhythm. Night was not perceived as interruption or threat, but as a familiar phase within an enduring cycle. Individuals moved into darkness with confidence rooted in routine rather than anticipation or fear. Through repeated exposure, environmental cues, and shared behavior, Nightfall along the Nile sustained calm and continuity quietly across generations. Evening calm in ancient Egypt developed through gradual reduction of activity rather than sudden withdrawal, as daily movement softened naturally in response to fading light and cooling air. The transition into quieter behavior did not require instruction or agreement, because shared familiarity with rhythm guided collective adjustment. Individuals reduced pace through habit rather than intention, allowing calm to emerge as an extension of routine rather than a deliberate action. Tasks that remained during evening hours emphasized maintenance rather than productivity, supporting continuity without demanding effort. Light domestic actions occurred slowly and predictably, preventing stimulation and preserving balance. This gentle activity maintained connection to routine while allowing energy to decline naturally, avoiding abrupt disengagement or restlessness. Evening calm therefore functioned as moderation rather than pause, supporting smooth transition toward rest. The environment reinforced this reduction through consistent cues, as diminished light limited visibility and encouraged stillness without enforcing it. Familiar surroundings required less navigation and decision-making, allowing individuals to move confidently with minimal effort. Environmental consistency reduced sensory input and distraction, enabling attention to soften without disengaging completely. The setting itself guided behavior quietly toward calm without requiring conscious control. Social behavior during evening hours aligned with reduced demand, as interaction became brief, restrained, and predictable. Shared understanding replaced coordination, allowing individuals to withdraw gradually without social tension or obligation. This alignment preserved harmony and prevented escalation, enabling calm to settle collectively rather than individually. Evening therefore reinforced communal rhythm through quiet synchronization rather than directive structure. Psychological effects of reduced activity supported relaxation by lowering cognitive and sensory load, allowing the mind to remain steady without stimulation. Familiar repetition limited surprise and anticipation, preventing heightened alertness as night approached. This gradual easing reduced internal friction and preserved continuity between waking activity and rest, supporting mental ease without forcing sleep. Calm emerged naturally as attention narrowed toward immediate presence rather than future concern. Domestic spaces absorbed evening calm through repeated use and familiar arrangement, as interiors, courtyards, and thresholds supported reduced motion and quiet presence. These spaces required little adjustment to accommodate stillness, allowing individuals to settle without effort or planning. Environmental familiarity reinforced comfort and security, supporting calm through predictability rather than isolation. The home therefore acted as a stabilizing container for evening rhythm, rather than a signal to disengage abruptly. Over time, the repetition of reduced activity and evening calm reinforced a worldview centered on balance and gradual transition. Evening was understood as a natural phase within daily rhythm, rather than a boundary or conclusion. Individuals moved toward rest through familiarity rather than intention, preserving calm and continuity across the shift from activity to stillness. Through gentle reduction shared rhythm and environmental consistency. Reduced activity and evening calm in ancient Egypt sustained daily life quietly and reliably across generations. Sleep and rest in ancient Egypt were approached as natural extensions of daily rhythm, rather than isolated activities requiring preparation or control, as rest emerged gradually from reduced movement and softened attention. Individuals did not force themselves into sleep through effort or intention, but allowed rest to arrive through familiarity with routine and environment. This approach reduced tension and preserved calm, enabling the body and mind to transition gently from activity into stillness without resistance or anticipation. Resting spaces within the household were shaped by repeated use rather than specialized design, supporting comfort through familiarity rather than novelty. Sleeping areas were arranged to minimize stimulation and unnecessary movement, allowing individuals to settle without adjustment or decision-making. Environmental consistency reduced cognitive demand, enabling rest to occur without alertness or evaluation. The space itself participated in guiding the body towards stillness through predictability and quiet presence. The process of falling asleep followed no rigid sequence, as rest unfolded according to individual readiness shaped by daily exertion and environmental cues. Light, temperature, and sound softened gradually, signaling the body to reduce awareness without abrupt change. This gradual shift prevented overstimulation and preserved continuity between waking and resting states, supporting deeper rest without interruption. Sleep therefore functioned as a continuation of rhythm rather than a departure from it. Social expectations around rest supported quiet alignment, as communal behavior encouraged reduced engagement and minimal disturbance during resting hours. Individuals adjusted actions in response to shared rhythm rather than explicit rule, allowing rest to remain protected without enforcement. This alignment reduced anxiety and preserved security, enabling sleep to occur without fear of interruption or obligation. Rest became a shared condition rather than a private struggle. Psychological aspects of rest were shaped by predictability and absence of urgency, as the mind was not required to process unresolved demand or anticipation. Familiar routine reduced mental activity, allowing thoughts to settle without effort or control. This reduction in cognitive stimulation supported sustained rest and prevented fragmentation of sleep. Calm emerged through repetition and trust in routine rather than through deliberate relaxation techniques. Nighttime stillness reinforced rest through environmental cues, as darkness and reduced sound limited sensory input naturally. The absence of sudden noise or movement preserved continuity and prevented abrupt awakening, allowing rest to deepen gradually. Environmental stability supported confidence and security, enabling the mind to release vigilance without concern. Sleep, therefore, occurred within a protective rhythm shaped by consistency rather than isolation. Over time, the repetition of rest and sleep reinforced a worldview centered on balance and renewal. Rest was valued not as an escape from activity, but as an integral phase within daily rhythm, supporting endurance across long periods of routine life. Individuals trusted the return of activity without anxiety, allowing sleep to fulfill its role without pressure. Through predictable environments, shared rhythm and gradual transition, sleep and rest in ancient Egypt sustained physical and mental stability quietly and reliably across generations. Aging in ancient Egypt was understood as a gradual accumulation of experience rather than a decline that required correction or concealment. As older individuals remained integrated within daily routine without separation or urgency. Age did not interrupt participation in ordinary life, because responsibility adjusted slowly through familiarity rather than reassignment. This gradual transition preserved balance and reduced anxiety, allowing individuals to continue contributing according to capacity rather than status or expectation. Experience gained through repetition carried quiet value within the community, as familiarity with routine tasks supported stability rather than innovation. Older individuals were not required to demonstrate authority or superiority, but contributed through presence and consistency. Their continued participation reinforced continuity across generations, allowing knowledge to persist without formal instruction or emphasis. Respect emerged through reliability rather than recognition, preserving calm within social interaction. Daily interaction between generations followed predictable patterns that minimized tension, as behavior aligned with shared understanding rather than explicit rule. Younger individuals adjusted naturally to the presence of experience, observing patterns and absorbing expectation without confrontation. This alignment reduced conflict and preserved harmony, enabling learning and cooperation to occur quietly within routine life. Aging therefore functioned as integration rather than separation, supporting stability through familiarity. The absence of abrupt role transition supported emotional steadiness for aging individuals, as identity evolved gradually without loss or disruption. Responsibility shifted through accumulation rather than removal, allowing purpose to remain intact across changing capacity. This gradual adjustment reduced fear and preserved confidence, enabling individuals to remain grounded within routine rather than anticipating withdrawal. Aging was therefore experienced as continuity rather than decline, reinforcing calm and acceptance within daily life. Household and communal environments supported aging through familiarity and consistency, as spaces remained recognizable and required minimal adaptation. Familiar paths, tools, and routines reduced physical and cognitive strain, allowing older individuals to navigate daily life without vigilance or anxiety. Environmental stability preserved independence and confidence, supporting sustained participation without risk or disruption. The environment itself participated in maintaining dignity through repetition and order. Social perception of aging emphasized endurance and reliability rather than change, valuing experience as a stabilizing element within the community. Older individuals embodied continuity through repeated presence rather than instruction or authority. This perspective reduced pressure to perform or withdraw, allowing aging to unfold quietly within routine life. Respect was maintained through shared understanding rather than formal acknowledgement, preserving calm within social structure. Over time, the repetition of experience and gradual transition reinforced a worldview centered on endurance and acceptance. Aging was valued as part of an ongoing cycle rather than a stage requiring intervention or separation, supporting balance across generations. Individuals moved through life with confidence grounded in familiarity rather than anticipation of loss. Through shared routine, environmental consistency, and gradual adjustment, aging and respect for experience in ancient Egypt sustained daily life quietly and reliably across long periods of time. Death in ancient Egypt was understood as a continuation of established order rather than a sudden rupture that required urgency or emotional escalation, as the transition from life followed familiar patterns grounded in routine and expectation. The end of physical activity did not represent chaos or interruption, but a shift within an enduring structure that preserved balance and continuity. This understanding reduced fear and uncertainty, allowing individuals to approach mortality with steadiness rather than anxiety or resistance. Practices surrounding death were integrated into daily life through repetition and familiarity rather than dramatic ceremony, reinforcing acceptance through routine presence. Preparation and acknowledgement followed known sequences that changed little over time, enabling participation without heightened emotion or disruption. Because these practices were expected rather than exceptional, individuals could engage calmly without anticipation or strain. Death, therefore, functioned as a phase within continuity rather than an event that destabilized daily rhythm. The perception of death as continuation influenced behavior long before its occurrence, shaping how individuals related to routine, responsibility, and rest. Life was lived with an understanding that order persisted beyond immediate experience, reducing pressure to accelerate achievement or avoid stillness. This perspective preserved calm by aligning daily activity with long-term continuity rather than finite urgency. Mortality was absorbed into rhythm rather than standing apart as a source of tension. Social response to death emphasized stability and alignment rather than emotional display, as communal behavior followed established norms that limited variation. Shared understanding guided interaction quietly, allowing acknowledgement without escalation or disruption. This restraint preserved harmony and protected routine from disturbance, enabling daily life to resume without fracture. Community response therefore reinforced continuity through familiarity rather than reaction. Spaces associated with death reflected permanence and order rather than separation or avoidance, as structures and locations remained consistent and recognizable. Familiar design reduced uncertainty and preserved confidence, allowing individuals to navigate these spaces without heightened awareness. Environmental stability reinforced acceptance by maintaining visual and spatial continuity with daily surroundings. The environment itself participated in framing death as part of ongoing structure rather than an isolated rupture. Generational understanding of death developed through observation and repetition rather than explanation, as individuals absorbed meaning through exposure to routine practice. Learning occurred quietly across time, reducing fear and preserving balance. Because understanding was embedded within daily life, individuals approached death without the need for reinterpretation or emotional preparation. Acceptance emerged naturally through familiarity rather than confrontation. Over time, the repetition of death-related practices reinforced a worldview centered on endurance and continuation. Death was not positioned as an ending that disrupted order, but as a transition that maintained alignment within an enduring cycle. Individuals moved through life with confidence grounded in stability rather than avoidance of loss. Through repeated practice, shared understanding, and environmental consistency, death as continuation, not disruption, in ancient Egypt sustained calm and coherence quietly across generations. Memory in ancient Egypt functioned as a stabilizing force rather than a collection of individual recollections, as shared remembrance supported continuity through repetition and familiarity. Tradition did not rely on active preservation or conscious effort, but unfolded naturally through routine behavior that repeated across generations. This form of memory reduced uncertainty and preserved calm, allowing the past to remain present without demanding attention or reinterpretation. Tradition was maintained through consistent action rather than narration, as daily practices embodied remembrance without verbal reinforcement. Individuals participated in memory by repeating familiar routines rather than recalling specific events, allowing continuity to persist without cognitive strain. This approach minimized variation and preserved alignment, ensuring that memory remained embedded within behavior rather than separated as reflection. Stability, therefore, emerged through action rather than recollection. Environmental consistency played a central role in sustaining memory, as familiar spaces, structures, and paths reinforced continuity through repeated exposure. The physical environment served as a reference that required no explanation, allowing individuals to orient themselves through recognition rather than thought. This familiarity reduced cognitive effort and preserved confidence, enabling memory to function quietly within daily life. Space itself became a vessel for tradition through repetition and permanence. Social interaction further reinforced shared memory through alignment rather than instruction, as behavior mirrored established patterns without conscious decision. Individuals learned tradition by participating rather than questioning, allowing understanding to settle gradually through exposure. This method preserved uniformity and reduced disruption, ensuring that memory remained collective rather than fragmented. Stability was therefore maintained through shared participation rather than deliberate teaching. Memory did not demand emotional engagement or personal interpretation, as tradition emphasized reliability over meaning. The repetition of known patterns provided reassurance and reduced anxiety, allowing individuals to move through daily life with confidence rooted in familiarity. This absence of emotional emphasis preserved calm and prevented escalation, supporting endurance rather than stimulation. Memory functioned as a background presence rather than a focal point of attention. Generational continuity reinforced stability by preserving behavior rather than story, as each generation absorbed routine through presence rather than explanation. Change occurred gradually through accumulation rather than replacement, preventing disruption to established rhythm. This gradual evolution allowed tradition to remain intact while accommodating subtle adjustment, preserving balance across time. Memory therefore supported both continuity and adaptation without tension. Over time, the repetition of tradition and shared memory reinforced a worldview centered on permanence and reliability. The past was not experienced as distant or separate, but as integrated within daily routine through familiar action and environment. Individuals lived within a structure shaped by accumulated experience rather than individual recollection, preserving calm through continuity rather than reflection. Through repeated behavior, shared space, and collective alignment, memory, tradition, and stability in ancient Egypt sustained daily life quietly and consistently across generations. Life in ancient Egypt was understood as a continuous flow rather than a sequence of separate days, as daily routine blended seamlessly into a broader rhythm that extended beyond individual experience. A single day did not stand alone or demand completion, because meaning emerged through repetition rather than resolution. This perspective allowed daily life to unfold without urgency or pressure, supporting calm by removing the need for closure or anticipation. Each day followed familiar patterns that required little reflection, reinforcing stability through repetition rather than variation. Morning activity, midday moderation, evening reduction, and rest returned reliably without requiring attention or evaluation. Because the structure of the day was known and predictable, individuals moved through time with confidence rather than awareness. Life, therefore, progressed as a steady current rather than a series of moments requiring reaction. The absence of emphasis on beginnings or endings preserved continuity, as transitions occurred gradually rather than abruptly. Waking did not announce a new start, and rest did not signal conclusion. This lack of sharp boundaries reduced mental stimulation and prevented disruption, allowing awareness to remain steady across shifts in activity. Time was experienced as circular rather than linear, reinforcing calm through repetition and return. Daily actions gained meaning through accumulation rather than intention, as routine behavior sustained order without requiring interpretation. Individuals did not need to assign significance to each action, because value emerged through consistency over time. This approach reduced cognitive load and preserved mental ease, allowing attention to rest within familiarity rather than searching for purpose. Life was maintained through presence rather than reflection. Environmental stability reinforced this sense of continuity, as spaces, landscapes, and structures remained consistent across repeated use. Familiar surroundings reduced uncertainty and anchored perception, enabling individuals to move through time without disorientation. The environment acted as a constant reference that required no engagement, supporting calm through recognition rather than stimulation. Place therefore participated in sustaining continuity alongside routine behavior. Social alignment further supported this enduring rhythm, as shared routines synchronized individual experience without coordination. People moved through daily life together without comparison or evaluation, reinforcing steadiness through collective familiarity. This alignment reduced isolation and tension, allowing continuity to be shared rather than individually maintained. Community therefore functioned as a stabilizing field that carried routine forward quietly. As night settled and activity softened, the rhythm of the day dissolved gently into rest without conclusion. There was no need to mark the end or prepare for the next beginning, because continuity persisted beyond awareness. This gentle fading supported deep calm and allowed attention to release without effort. Life extended beyond the single day through repetition rather than memory. Over time, this understanding of continuity shaped a worldview centered on endurance and balance. Existence was valued for its steadiness rather than its events, preserving calm by aligning daily life with an unbroken flow. Individuals lived within a rhythm that required no acceleration and no closure, allowing rest to arrive naturally. Through repetition, familiarity, and shared routine, continuity beyond a single day in ancient Egypt sustained calm presence quietly and endlessly across generations.